whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong, whether I find a place in this world or never belong. I gotta be me. I gotta be me. What else can I be but what I am? I want to live, not merely survive. And I won't give up this dream of life that keeps me alive.
I'm Joe Polito. This is Celebrity Talk. We've kept the details of this interview concealed, as well as the location, until now. Seated next to me is Tony Napoli, or as he is known by friends and the FBI, Tony Nap. He is the son of one of the most powerful and respected organized crime leaders of the modern era. Tony's father was Genovese family capo James Jimmy Nap Napoli, a mob kingpin who ruled over the largest gambling empire in America for almost 40 years. And I'd like to introduce now Tony Nap. Tony, thank you so much for giving us opportunity to talk to you today, and I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Joe. And it's nice of you to invite me here, and it's nice of you to show some interest in my true story about my lifestyle and the 9 different lives I lived, and thanking my father who kept me alive.
You know, I just let everybody know a little about your father. Aside from being the son of Jimmy Nap, what was your tie-in with the mob?
My tie with the mob was I was Jimmy Nap's son, and I was always introduced to other mob guys with titles, always as Jimmy Nap's son, never as Anthony Napoli, my real name. And that went on for years and years. Until today, people see me, they say, "Oh, hi, you're Jimmy Nap's son, aren't you?" You know. So my ties with the mob was I was well respected because of that, but you have to still be in character, true to yourself, with integrity and with dignity, to be accepted by the mob guys, especially the bosses, even though you're the son of an underboss. My father was considered a capo, but he employed 300 families. That means he employed over 300 men in the number business in the 5 boroughs. So therefore, he was well respected and was their Don as well as my Don, because without my father, they could have never paid their rent or their mortgages, so he gave them something to do. He showed them how to make 25% on every dollar they turned into him to the people at warehouses, at retail stores, average working men and women that wanted to play the number and not have to worry about paying income tax if they won.
Well, you know, you wrote an incredible book, which I read and I couldn't put down. And it was about your father and the life you had with Jimmy Nap. Can you tell us how your dad got started and maybe how he first met Al Capone?
Well, when my father was a young teenager, he was considered a prodigal son, relating to me later on in life when I was born. And after I was born, I became a prodigal son as well to him and my mother, because I didn't listen to him. I didn't want to take orders. And what happened was, the stories that were told to me by my aunts and uncles, my father came from a family of 8 children, 6 sisters, 1 brother, and himself. And his father struggled, and his father wanted him to be a mason tender and help build tunnels as a groundhog and as a construction worker building buildings in New York City and high-rises. My father, when he was 15 years old, well, actually 14 when he got out of grammar school, he never went to school after that, and he brought with him some men that were close friends of his when they were 14 years old till the day he died. And till the day they died, they always associated with him, and he gave them something to do to make a living. Most of them were controllers in his number business. Most of them were collectors. They weren't tough guys, though, but they were able to collect the money because they knew Jimmy Knapp sent them, and they weren't about to mess with them. And they were nice individuals who had regular jobs as well as working for my father for extra money that they were able to survive on. And so the relationship I had, close relationship, in the mob. I was accepted by bosses and restaurants. I got the red carpet treatment. And I decided that when my father went to jail a few times, one the last time when he was 65 years old till he was 72, that was a 7-year stretch he did for gambling without a license or promoting gambling without a license. And he was sentenced under the RICO Act that tied up his townhouse, worth over $2.5 million at the time. Not one penny could he have left for anybody because the government detached it because of his back income tax. And I was proposed at one time by Fat Tony Salerno when my father was in jail, because I went out and got some of the number business back that left him while he was in jail, because his supervisors, who were also blood-related relatives, screwed around with the money and gambled every day. I won't mention them by name because they're alive, and not only that, they have family. And there's no reason to condemn them, because I, too, spent money and used money that belonged to my father as well. However, my father always complimented me and said, if you do your own business, you're accepted, but you'll never work for me. There's only one tough guy in his family, and that's me, meaning himself. And he meant the Napoli family, not the Genovese family. And therefore, he never used me, so I had to go out and get my own business when he went to jail, loan sharking, number business, and I was accepted by the mob because I went out after the controllers in the number business left the blood-related relatives because they weren't paying them on time. I went out and bombed their clubs in Bedford-Stuyvesant. I went out and had my men, and we worked them over, and I got the business back, and I was complimented by Fat Tony Salerno, who put me on the honor roll. When my father got out of jail, he took me off the honor roll, and he said, "You're my burden, not theirs. And the only time you'll ever be recognized in any family would be in the Napoli family, and no other family. You're above all that." He always complimented me. And he kept me in gambling casinos, legalized gambling casinos. Of course, I had the knowledge of crap tables, baccarat tables, how to organize, how to disorganize, and whatnot. Matter of fact, there was a time when the FBI said, in Vegas, they walked me off the floor at Caesar's Palace and said, "You're a member of organized crime." And I said, "That's a compliment, because I'm so damn disorganized, you have no idea."
You know, it's absolutely amazing. And I know if you can talk about the long trip your dad had taken early on by truck from New York to Chicago.
Yes.
And that's very interesting. They would love to hear that.
Okay. Well, since my father was 16 years old, he was driving those trucks to Chicago on dirt roads. And, of course, he had to carry a piece with him. That would be a gat or a gun. And it could have been a Tommy gun, they called it in those days as well, because he could have got hijacked from other people in the mob, from different families, as he's driving along with his helper, his helper. And what happened was he made a few trips like that. And Frankie Yale recommended my father to Al Capone, who was in Chicago. And the reason Al Capone was in Chicago, because Frankie Yale sent him there after Al Capone worked in the speakeasy for Frankie Yale, whose real name in Italian is Ioella. And he had a fight as a bouncer. Al Capone worked as a bouncer then for Frankie Yale in his speakeasy with the Five Points gang in Coney Island area. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, was Frankie Yale's gumara. So anyway, my father was dating my mother, and that's how he met Frankie Yale, through my mother. That's why my mother used to say I was connected before I ever married you, Jimmy, you know. Well, anyway, Frankie Yale recommended my father for this particular assassination of Elliot Ness, who was a pain in the ass bothering Al Capone's bureaus and having them bombed and whatnot. And they needed somebody to take care of this here Elliot Ness. He didn't realize that Frankie Yale recommended him for the assassination of Elliot Ness, according to Elliot Ness. So what happened was, when my father got to the social club in Chicago, he was sent for after delivering the bootleg liquor. Actually, it was mostly kegs of beer, too, to Capone's warehouse. One of the foremen said, "Jimmy, the boss wants to see you," meaning Capone. And he went in there and he thought something was wrong, because Capone had his office next door to the warehouse, but it was a social club in the back room. My father walked back there, and there was an old man at the door with a cat in his hand, according to the Untouchable show. The cat in his hand, the old man was petting it, and this so-called Jimmy Knapp torpedo from Greenpoint, Brooklyn, pushes the old man aside. And as Jimmy Knapp goes in the back room, the old man never forgot that this Jimmy Knapp, the so-called torpedo from Williamsburg section of Brooklyn, pushed him the way he did. And my father walked back there, and there was Frank Nitti and a few of Capone's cronies at the table. And Capone told them all to kiss Jimmy Knapp, and they did and left. And Jimmy Knapp, allegedly Jimmy Knapp, stood in front of Al Capone. Al Capone kissed him on the lips. That segment was called the kiss of death. That means there's a hit job, and that man who gets kissed by the boss is going to do the hit job. So now, what happens is this. When Jimmy Knapp leaves, there's a hit. They show you the scenes. Elliot Ness states this in detail in his book that he released, his autobiography in 1957. Well, this is what he says, that Jimmy Knapp pulled up alongside Elliot Ness and one of his lieutenants in a car parked, and they were talking, and Jimmy Knapp supposedly used a submachine gun, a Thompson submachine gun, and missed Elliot Ness, but hit his partner, who was covered, who jumped on top of Elliot Ness in the front seat, saved Elliot Ness's life, and the partner died. And in the scene, it shows Elliot Ness and the rest of his guys go the next day, and they find Jimmy Knapp in a flop house, hiding out, and they break the door down, they grab him, they arrest him, they bring him to jail, and they bring the old man who was petting the cat in front of the doorway of the back room of the club. And that old man was going to be the material witness against Jimmy Knapp. Why? Because the man the agent that actually got killed was a close friend of that old man. Because that agent who got killed formerly was a mob guy that was part of the Untouchables later on. He was reformed mob guy, helping Elliot Ness find out where the locations were of the warehouses where the bootleg liquor and beer was being made by Al Capone. So he was a former mob guy that was killed, and he was not an FBI agent per se. He was hired by Elliot Ness and part of that team. So anyway, that old man who was always petting the cat was locked up as a material witness, because in those days they didn't have what they call witness protection program. They didn't have what they call today Team America, which should be eliminated from those protective custody people. Now, that old man, the next morning, they found him dead in his cell with a shiver in his chest. That would be a spoon that was shaved into a knife by one of the prisoners. But how they got into that cell, it couldn't have been Jimmy Knapp. He was locked up in his own cell. It had to be that Al Capone had a connection with the jailhouse guards. They used the spoon as a shiv that was shaved into a point. The jailhouse guard, or we call him a hack, because they made it look like a prisoner did it. So that would be circumstantial evidence. But they never found who killed that old man, and they had to release Jimmy Knapp Napoli, and he came back to Brooklyn, met his mother in St. Mary's Church, around the corner from his mother and father's house, They had a 6-family house in those days on Tenax Street, and that's when my father made amends and came back to his mother and father as the prodigal son comes back. And he stayed with his father because his father was dying, and he helped support his mother and quite a few of his sisters for years, because after that, he was well respected by the mob guys because he took no money. He didn't ask for a fee. And therefore, people had to realize there are not only 5 families, organized crime families in New York, there are also families in other states. But we won't go that far.
If you like the Tony Knapp interviews, you will have to read his book, My Father, My Don. There is much more information that was in the interview, and I'm sure, like me, you won't be able to put the book down. So to find out how to purchase this amazing true story, just go to Tony's website at www.myfathermydon.com. Now that you've seen segment 1 of Tony Knapp, My Father, My Don, you won't want to miss segment 2 when Tony talks about what it was like growing up in the Napoli family. Stay tuned.